We're at All Saints Church in Dulverton, which actually oddly enough just crosses over the Somerset borders, which is quite nice. This church has been here for millenniums, absolute millennia. But what it will say is, I say the church has been here, that's strictly not right. The church has been here since about they say 1855, it's actually the early 1800s when there was a chapel started to form here. But if we take it back in time, right, most of these churches, they're built on previous sites. Now, it might surprise some of you to believe that the direct route of this Dulverton part, it has a direct connection to the Cainan line, which takes us right the way back to 5513 BC. So literally over 7,000 years ago. This particular site was in use for something quite different back then. But the church today is a very nice church. It's got some very interesting things. I quite like this part here. And clearly I don't even see much with the lighting on it, regards to the table one of who made the various monies and things. But clearly the Humphrey Bear paid £5, which, if you can imagine, going back to the sort of mid to late 1800s, £5 was a considerable amount of money. There seemed to be something with the church regards to the £27 that was outstanding on the ledger, and they decided to use that for the local poor and distressed at the time. So that's quite interesting. There's a really nice, it's a nice feel about it, as I say. The main pews are certainly the originals, which is nice to see, and most of it's quite original, to be fair. We can certainly see from the stained glass windows, which I do find quite interesting, because what it shows is that the stages of two lambs to the Jesus, and it shows two lambs in the first part, to a lamb over the shoulder, to into the third part, it's a human, which could give you the sort of sense of evolution, perhaps, if we use that such a term, from ape to man. We know ape to man isn't strictly true, but with some kind of interjection with something else, it could be potentially correct. We've got to say the Parish Church is this lovely, really. There's the windows here are remarkably preserved in regards to the main part. Fortitude, humility, justice. And yeah, and you can certainly see the transitional phase between Latin to Old English to Modern English, where we see fortitude, humility and justice, but written in almost like a mixed match of Latin as well, which is quite interesting in that particular sense. Nothing too much to say here, but I'm just rather intrigued about what Peter, that's not Jesus though, that's Peter there, what he's holding there is some sort of gold towards his hands there, just almost resting on his left arm, that central piece there, which is quite interesting. We've got justice, obviously the scales, that's quite straightforward. We've got the Jesus slaying the wolf, or fighting the wolf at least. You can't see behind the flowers there, but there's a piece there behind the flowers, I don't want to move the display, of the Jesus actually baptising the feet of St John. So St John the Baptist. So that's quite interesting there. It's sort of a bit of a role reversal, really. Here, this piece here, the St Nicolas Statue, St Nikalaus. Amazing piece. That's the original, through and through. That wouldn't have been there originally. That would have been much more prominent in the actual building. It wouldn't have been stuck up there. So whatever was there has now been, and as we can see, this is a fairly modern block, but I can but assume that the parish have decided to put that there for preservation, really, if nothing more, because that's an original piece. So we're looking at about 200 years old per se, 300 years old, stretching to that particular piece, which is absolutely amazing. The main high altar, as we head up this way. Lovely artworks and things, carved. And we've got the Lady Chapel there, which is a different chapel dedicated to a male species actually over there, which is quite nice. it's nice. I don't think we need to talk about that part too much. With this particular fellow, it's amazing because there's a lot of energy off of this particular chap here. Obviously the soldiers, and if you can read there, we've got the Viscount de Vesci, which, or Vesci as it would have been, was a member of Parliament for the Somerset Division, but he also joined the Irish Guards and served through the Great War for the Irish Guards, not for the English battalions, which is quite interesting. Born 1880, died 1923. We can assume he died in the Great War. That makes more sense for that. 43 years old. So, when he died. So there's not much to really say about the small chapel here. It's dedicated and now known as the Herbert Memorial Chapel, purely because of the half-brother of the 5th Earl of Carnarvon, or Carnarvon rather. But one thing I quite like about it is this particular cross. It's the colours that have been used, almost in like a Art Deco effect. But I quite like that. The 3 intrinsic circles there at the top, which is just quite nice. It gives a nice lighting, a nice feel to the place. And of course we've got the standard, usual cross on the actual water itself of the Knight's Cross, Templar Cross, which is quite nice. And then we've also got the Fleur de Lis onto the pedestals, as it were, footstools, kneeling stools, whatever you want to call them. Again, you can see there's a lot of items that are missing that would have been here, and this is just a blank area. There would have been something here quite nicely at the time, a dedication to the particular season, really. You only get the real kick of energy when you come around into this particular area, and this is what I find quite interesting, because the historians say that this church was built in mid 1800s. It clearly, as I say, it can prove that this chapel in this area was used as a chapel for longer than that. And one of those proofs is quite simple. This is in the old wooden chapel that was here before it, in that particular space and time. And if you can see, the carving of this particular priest's chair is dated 1744. And carved 1744. Yet this church was built 1800s, late 1800s, mid 1800s. So it shows that this chair then is obviously 50, 60 years ahead of its time. So that's quite nice. And when you sit in there, I don't know, it's just quite interesting to sit in it, and you get a real sense of something quite nice with it, actually, to be fair. Probably cursed now, but never mind. But here we are. The main thing here, it's lovely, is this original piece of Mary, we say Mary Magdalene, and it's a beautiful piece of the window. It's an original lead, so I'm trying not to touch it. I don't like to touch lead these days, if I can help it. But you can see this is a real lead window, and they've got a lovely lead trim around there as well. But I try to avoid lead like the plague. We've got St Nicholas here as we come round to the main area. So we've got the St Nicholas here and St Peter. It's quite interesting. It's almost like sin and redemption straight in together, because we've got old Nick. But yeah, so it's quite interesting that Nicholas, and I'm quite intrigued that Nicholas is actually holding the jewel ring staff, the staff of wisdom, with the jewel ring emblem at the top of the staff. I don't know how much you can see of that. But if you see to the left column here, we can see the staff coming up, and we've got the jewel ring within the clasp horn. So that I was particularly interested about. We've got the usual sign, as we know from the central part. We've got the Saru Solo, the King of Kings, referring to the actual main salute, the main sign, which is obviously the index finger, the middle finger and the thumb raised onto the right hand, thus the other 2 fingers retracted. So that's quite nice as well. It almost is a mockery in the 3rd section regards to the aspect here, because again then we've got St George that comes in, so that's a later addition to the church really, because that's about St George and the Dragon, and that's quite interesting as well. But I love the thing here, it says here the little poem part, which is quite nice, to the left here above the Madonna. And this is not about Jesus here, this is about the Madonna here on this part. The reason firm, the temperate will, endurance, foresight, strength and skill, a perfect woman nobly planned, to warn, to comfort and command, and yet a spirit still and bright, with something of angelic light. So here, this is dedicated very much, and I'll just move that way so you can see the Latin, for those of you who watch this video and actually do understand the true version of Latin. It talks here about the memory of the commissioners of Portsmouth, and it's Portsmouth Quay. We can see the quay there. Filarum sororum uxorum. It's quite straightforward, as it talks about how the legend and how their dedication to their exemplary requests. So this whole window is dedicated to, if we see the Latin there, if you can read Latin, but it's dedicated to, and I can only loosely translate, but it basically reads the main parts about how they dedicate themselves to the commission at Portsmouth Quay. So, and if we think about that, we've got the travellers from Ireland coming into Portsmouth at that particular point in time for trade and commerce, and then we've got a high Irish concentration and connection in Dulverton area, because then we've got the people from this area that are actually joining the Irish Guards for the Great War, which is quite interesting. So we've got a lot of Irish connection here in this particular church, and I say I can't emphasise enough, that goes back 5,513 years to Cainan, C-A-I-N-A-N, Cainan, which is quite nice. But a nice little church in Dulverton, says All Saints, worth a visit, simple as they say, but effective.